think you have to absolutely love the creative rut. Love it so much. It's like really embrace it. Okay, creative rut. I'm not going to try and get out of it. I'm just going to study it and be curious about it. And there's the Buddhist philosophy, which is the obstacle is the path. And it's the idea of move towards the thing you're trying to get away from. And absolutely, it's not like, oh, I'm in a creative rut. Wonderful. I'm enjoying it. It's painful and it's horrible. Maybe part of it is thinking that there is a completeness or there is an absence that comes. And by expressing that vulnerability or that anxiety or that fear, I'm going to be less, or my self-worth is going to be less in that way. It's now become so much that if I didn't allow the imperfections and wonkiness in my art, it wouldn't be my art anymore. It might be wonky or an error or not make sense to me. Someone else might make sense of it.
I'm joined by Steve Chapman, artist, illustrator, writer, speaker, podcaster, accidental industry outsider, and a deeply curious human who has absolutely no interest in fitting neatly into the creative world as it currently exists. Steve's work lives in the messy, wonderful in-between anxiety and whimsy, childhood and adulthood, masks and unmasking, silence and expression. He doesn't navigate the creative industry so much as wander into it, do something quietly, radical, and then disappear again. In this conversation, we talk about reconnecting with your 8-year-old self, why start before you're ready might be the most generous creative rule you can adopt, how capitalist norms flatten true creativity, and why following fascination, not strategy, can lead to the most meaningful work of your life. We explore vulnerability, neurodivergence, operating in the edges, and what it means to give yourself an unbridled permission to be strange, soft, curious, and fully yourself. If this episode resonates, follow, leave a review, or you can DM me over on Instagram at Creatively Eccentric. If you would love to be a guest and share your story, register to join the guest waitlist. You'll be the first to hear when applications reopen. The link to sign up will be in the show notes.
Thank you for having me. I mean, that might take up the entire time we've got. I'll try and be succinct. I guess the least inconvenient label is I'm an artist, I'm a writer, I'm a speaker, I'm a podcaster myself. I make stuff and I write stuff and I work with others, and I like following fascinating chains of thought, and that may result in a project, or it might result in a piece of art, or it might result in a piece of writing. I mean, that's probably helps people know me less than they did before I said that, but that's my best stab at describing what I do.
That's cool. We're definitely going to be talking more about what you actually do, and it's quite a wide collective selection of all your
saying it.
Yeah. This is a question I love to ask my guests when they're on the podcast is when you hear the words bold voices, messy journeys, zero apologies, which part of your journey does that resonate with?
Oh, I think messy, just the word messy. Not having a plan, or maybe having a plan, but not really knowing what it is. And the messiness is what makes life exciting, I think. And it can make it like traumatic and hard as well. But yeah, I'd rather have a messy journey than any of the other things.
Some people answer all of those. There's a amalgamation of, some people have a quiet voice, they want to be more bold. So it's interesting. I think you described yourself as a weird child. When did you first learn that you were weird, and was it valuable?
Jeez, that's a brilliant question. Not as a child, I didn't know that at all. No, and probably over the last 20 years is when I realised it. Like, and particularly more recently, looking back and like writing and recording a podcast and reminiscing about childhood, thinking they were strange things that I used to do. But of course, I was just me at the time. I didn't know anything else. Like writing this weird music and performing it in assembly, and then remembering what that music was. And music's in inverted commas, and thinking that's a strange thing to do. So I guess it's sort of like my life's been like a sandwich. I was naturally like that as a kid. And then secondary school didn't really appreciate or embrace that. So I started rounding myself off and trying to fit in, which it didn't succeed. I didn't fit in, but I just also lost myself in it. And then into the world of work. And then the middle of the sandwich is just, I guess, trying to fit in and be normal, but really at some level knowing that that's not me. And then the final bit of the sandwich, which I'm in now, I mean, maybe it's a multi-layered sandwich. Maybe I'll go back into that bit, but is just thinking, oh no, I want to reaccess that strange 8-year-old. He was much less professional and productive in that sort of capitalist normal sense of the word, but he was much more fun. He was much more interesting.
I'm just thinking, as we're children, we're kind of fearless and we have no filters to some degree. And do you think like these 8-year-olds or younger Steve was maybe more, freer? And what is the Steve like today? Do you think, regards to the comparisons?
Well, I think he was definitely freer because the concept of not free hadn't really entered his mind or my mind then, I don't think. Because if I think now, and there's some areas of my life that I really don't care what other people think. So with my art, I don't care if anyone likes it or not. I genuinely don't. And I make it just for me. But with stuff like I write music and I occasionally perform music at an open mic, and I care too much about what other people think. And I always hate the experience and I hate the idea of it. I hate doing it. And then afterwards say, I'll never do that again. But for 8-year-old Steve to create this nonsensical piece of music and then recruit someone else to play it with him as a duet and then perform that in assembly in front of the school, I guess that must have been free. But I cannot remember, and it's strange, isn't it, memory? Because memory isn't like a videotape. It's we recreate the memory in that moment as we access it. So it's going to be completely distorted. It's so long ago. But I don't remember it even coming into my mind. What if people think this is shit? What if people think you're weird? So there would have been a lot more freedom then. And I think maybe I'm a work in progress mix of 8-year-old me and the middle bit of that sandwich, like the sensible me that learns how the world works, and maybe a bit more of a happy balance now, because 8-year-old me probably wouldn't survive in the world just being like that. So I've learned some sensibilities, but it's like that whole thing of like you need to know the rules in order to break the rules. Like play the game in order to make the game work for you. So it's maybe a happy mix now, but it's always a work in progress. I sort of hope I never get there wherever there is.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but when I was similar age, when I was a kid, I was into art and being creative, etc. And I remember this part of my life, I wanted to be more creative, and I tried to take more risks. But I just remembered the fear mostly of like it was just a little thing. Like I was being in a play and I forgot to remove some makeup off my face, and people were just laughing. I couldn't understand why. I feel like as creatives, as adults, we feel that we've drifted away from ourselves a bit. How do you
Yeah,
begin to reconnect to that child, that innocence and creative spark that we used to have? Do you think?
I, I don't know is the short and unhelpful answer, but I think it's something like the more we seek it, the less we find it. Like it's more of a being open to it emerging. Maybe like I don't understand quantum physics at all, but there's a particle in quantum physics, isn't there, that doesn't exist when it's observed. I like that. It scrambles my brain. So maybe it's a bit like that. If we go seeking that freedom that we had as a child, it's not going to happen. But I find now discovering myself in moments of immersion and flow that I only really know I've been in when I come out of them is the way to do it. And art's been that for me before, and the podcast and the writing is that for me now. But that there's a concept that I've spoken about on the podcast before called quantum flirting, which comes from a guy called Arnie Mindell, and I love it. Just the words quantum flirting. As soon as you say quantum flirting to someone, they write it down. even though they don't know what I'm going to say. It might be a brand of washing powder for all they know. That's a good brand of washing powder, actually. I would buy a washing powder called Quantum Flirting, even if it didn't wash clothes. But quantum flirting, the idea that Arnie Mindell speaks about is we go around our human experience like seeking stuff and thinking we choose to place our attention. Whereas quantum flirting for me is the opposite. It's being open to hearing the quiet whispers of stuff calling for our attention. And I think that creativity works in that way as well, or at least for me. If I go seeking an idea, I'm not going to find it. I'm going to find something that's just a synthetic substitute for an idea. Whereas if I practice in being open and curious and letting things like dance in the peripheral edges of my awareness, then they're always exciting. And I think as a child, I don't think I would have sought anything in particular. I'd just do it because I couldn't not do it. And I think that fascination, the idea of being fascinated has become so important to me because if I'm fascinated, I am immersed and I will do stuff. And a lot of the projects I've done have been big and strange, and people say, "Oh, that must be fearless or brave," but it's not. It's just I'm so fascinated I can't do it.
Yeah, I think you may have touched on something in regards to like I think you do talk about it about being the human side of creativity. I think your work you said explores creativity not as a skill set, but as a way of being human. So, what does creativity reveal about what it means to be human? Do you think?
I mean, it's I'm always fascinated by the 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 definition we have of creativity. I was invited to speak at Cannes Lions in 2017, I think, and I went. It was like in the briefing for it, and I know nothing about the creative industry at all. I've worked in it. I like drop in and do a talk or a workshop and then drop out again. So I know I have no expertise in it. And I genuinely found it bizarre when I was in Cannes of people introducing themselves to me saying, "Oh, I'm a creative," or "I'm not a creative." And it's like, what are you talking about? I don't understand. And then they said, for me, I mean, it's an entire week long festival of creativity, and I mean, it's huge. And they said to me, right, the last day when I was doing my talk, that bit's about the human side of creativity. And I said to them, what the hell are you doing the rest of the week then? What's all that about? Because for me, it's, I guess that type of creativity, and I'm not knocking it, I just don't understand it, is that's about commoditizing something. Maybe it's a big C creativity, like capital C creativity. But as human beings, we need to be creative in order to cross the road every time. Like, it's, for me, it's our ability to respond to a moment in a particular way that meets our needs or serves our needs. And it's, for me, creativity is getting closer to a freedom of spontaneous self-expression. And I love that freedom of spontaneous self-expression because that makes it neutral. It doesn't mean that it's about making art or about doing a dance. Your creative free self-expression could be that you have a pen in your hand and you draw something, or it could be that you have a spreadsheet, or you're caring for a child or something. So for me, it's maybe that big C creativity that confuses me is a manifestation of the other thing. But I think at the heart of it, that's what it is. It's just a natural human thing, and I guess maybe every sentient creature has it, but we have the curse of an observer brain, so we obsess about it too much, whereas everything else just does it naturally.
Yeah, and we kind of almost self-sabotage ourselves sometimes. We're always feeling uncomfortable, living on the edge of things and not being comfortable with being uncomfortable, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
So, and
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, no, absolutely. And it's, I think, fear of rejection, fear of like damaged self-worth and things like that. I mean, they inhibit me all the time, but I think that's what lies at the heart of it. Um, there's a philosopher called Eric Fromm who wrote a book called Escape from Freedom that you may have come across. And Fromm's whole hypothesis was that if human beings really experienced the freedom that we so desire, it would utterly overwhelm us, because we'd have to completely accept that we are insignificant and impermanent beings floating around in a disinterested universe. So he was saying that everything we do is an escape from freedom. Like, we'll do these things so we don't experience that. And I love that as a hypothesis. But he talks about intrinsic and extrinsic freedom. He calls it something else that confused me. So I've changed it to intrinsic and extrinsic freedom. And that's, what is the freedom that the world out there appears to give me? And that could be that I'm in a job that I feel gives me or restricts my freedom, or a relationship. But what's the really interesting thing is, where's that internal restriction or freedom? And a lot of that comes from really old stuff around self-worth, around identity, around who we are, around the rules that I swallowed as being true about me and who I should be because of who I am. And so that, yeah, I think that there's both factors are important, but we often like obsess with the external factors, and that they're really important as well. And depending on who you are and where you live and your circumstances, they're going to be more or less oppressive. But that important work, that inner work's as important, if not more important.
Yeah, and I like the way you described, you celebrate, was it the wonkiness, the awkward,
Yeah.
messy parts of being a human, being creative. So what do you think most people, why people try too hard to hide their process? What do you think that is? Do you think, apart from being, scared and fearful, do you think there's other reasons why people do
I
it?
mean, I don't, maybe it's a norm. I did a thing at Amsterdam Fashion Academy. I think it was last January 2025. And it was groups of people. It was a lovely event. It was groups of the, and I know nothing about the fashion world, clearly. And it was like groups of fashion students in their final year. And they invited people from like the fashion industry and me for some reason. And we just sat down at tables and had different conversations with them and rotated round. And it was a lovely event. And they were, I guess, like early mid-20s. And every table, every conversation, I got asked the same question roughly, which was, so when does the fear go? When does that fear about getting it wrong, or that anxiety, where does the anxiety go? And I said, I don't think it does. I still experience it, and I was a lot older than them, and they were really surprised by that, and also found it. Well, they were sort of disappointed, but I think they found it really helpful as well. And it's like, oh right, so maybe part of it is thinking that there is a completeness or there is an absence that comes, and by expressing that vulnerability or that anxiety or that fear, I'm going to be less, or like my self-worth is going to be less in that way. Whereas I think I I like leaving. I mean, it's now become so much that if I didn't allow the imperfections and wonkiness in my art, it wouldn't be my art anymore. And it sort of defines it. I guess what might be wonky or an error or not make sense to me, someone else might make sense of it. So it's sort of part. I mean, there's a load we can go into here around what it means, like the norms of what it means to be a successful human being in at least in I don't know other societies well at all, but to be a successful human being in a Western capitalist society, it's not really geared towards wonkiness and error. It's about straight lines and linear progression and things like that. So there's probably a load of social and psychological and philosophical factors that are at play there. I mean, I always come back to, well, we don't know where we came from and we don't know where we're going. So why should the bit in the middle make sense? Why should the bit in the middle be nice and neat and ordered? This is probably the most normal bit of our experience. So yeah, but I sort of take an existential philosophical lens to everything that doesn't make sense to everyone, but it soothes me.
I enjoyed that kind of wonkiness of your style, and I think I did mention that very similar to one of your artists that you really do love, Jim, aka Vic Reeves, and Bob Mortimer. fame,
Yeah.
and I can see similarities. And I think you met him, didn't you,
Yeah.
on one of your podcasts?
I did a project in 2018, which was called Sound of Silence, which was the world's first silent podcast featuring special guests. And that's a good example, actually, of a curious question that I become fascinated by, so much so that I don't care what anyone else thinks. And it was that came about because it was at a time when there was just a plethora of podcasts that I was coming across that didn't seem to have much to say and were people doing a podcast just for the sake of doing a podcast. It's like that's what everyone was doing. And I just thought, well, I wonder what the opposite of a podcast would be. Oh, it would be nothing. It would be silence. And what if I broadcast silence every week? And what would make it weirder is what if I had a special guest that I had on it every week and we record it face to face? And what would make it even more extreme is having maybe some big names and celebrities on it. And so that's what I did. Like every week for 2.5 years, 100 episodes, I put out recorded silence and invited loads of people, like people I admired, people I'd always wanted to meet. And Jim was one of them. And he was the first sort of celebrity, I guess, that said yes to it. And it was such a weird day. I went to his house in Kent and I remember walking up the drive to knock on his door and thinking, I'm knocking on Vic Reeves's door to record silence with him. And this is someone that I grew up watching on telly. And but again, that's it. If you follow your fascination, you're going to have all sorts of adventures.
It's just strange to think that we would depend on the silence, but then the space and quietness is speaks volumes sometimes.
Yeah,
And you're
yeah,
waiting for the anticipation. Like I've listened to a few episodes, and I was like, this must be either really, really awkward for the recording or really, really fascinating. And I was wondering, what are they doing? Are they looking at each other? Are they ignoring each other? What are they doing physically? And it's interesting what you do in that short. Was it 3 minutes approximately for each
yeah. It was
episode?
2 minutes of silence. So I do a quick introduction, then we'd have 2 minutes of silence, and then right, thank you at the end. I never literally it was what happens if I put out a silent podcast. And what's great about not having KPIs or objectives is you can learn so much more, like wherever it goes. And that was one of the fascinating things around what the silence did to the listeners, because it created a space that they could pour their imagination or their needs into it. And people would say, I love this podcast, it's about anxiety, or I love this podcast, it's about mental health, or I love this podcast, it's about seagulls, because there's seagulls in the background or something. And I'd say, yeah, that's what it's about. And it's like, oh, okay, this is interesting. It's a downloadable empty container or an audible empty container, and people will go in different directions with it. And then for me, the experience of every guest was completely different. And I mean, I soon realized that literal silence, like an absence of vibration and noise, was impossible to find anywhere. The only place I found it was in an underground medieval prison cell. And that was interesting in itself because we recorded there and it's like, I have to go to a place of oppression and torture to find silence in a modern world. But it was different for different people. Sometimes we sort of just looked at each other awkwardly, and sometimes we'd just sit with our heads down. And I remember I recorded with Terry Waite, the former Beirut hostage, and that was fascinating because we spent the entire day together talking about philosophy and war and peace and religion and captivity, then recorded nothing, then carried on with the amazing conversation. But that was, I just remember recording with Terry and he shut his eyes. So I shut my eyes and then I opened my eyes just before the end because I needed to see how much longer we had left on my timer. And I just thought, I wonder where he's gone. I wonder where he's gone in this moment. And then I wonder where the listeners will go in that moment as well. And what's bizarre is some of the episodes are way more popular than others. And it's like, why is Eddie Izzard's silence more popular than the little old lady down the road I recorded with? And again, it's just fascinating that even in silence, the fact that it's someone that's known makes it more listenable. And what I love is the whole thing. I could have made up the whole thing. I could have just sat, I could have just sat in my studio pretending and then photoshopping photos of people. So the whole thing could be a massive ruse. I mean, I wish it was. It cost me so much money, like traveling around doing it. But again, it was just a fascinating project that started with a curious question. And then it's same with all of the projects. It's like there were points when I hated it, absolutely hated it. It's like, but because I designed an endpoint, endings are really important to me. Because I designed an endpoint right at the start, I wanted to get to that endpoint.
So why did you hate it? Those moments, do you think?
Oh, there were moments when it's like I'd get one guest for every 20 that I invited, or it would be I've got to travel for 5 hours to record 2 minutes of silence with someone, and just I don't know. Like sometimes I think, oh, this is an episode that, and this is another really important thing, that this is an episode that everyone's going to love, and then not many people listen to it, which is a trap with anything. It's like same with art. If I make art to be popular, then it's not going to work. And I think it was just maybe, and I think I've let go of this now. Is as an artist and a creative, thinking, always waiting for that thing that's going to be the big break, and then realizing that that doesn't happen. It occasionally happens for a tiny, tiny amount of people. But mainly time and money, and then just getting towards the end and thinking, what am I doing here? I need to be earning money. And I had the same thing with What the February, which was the challenge that I did on Instagram every year. So every day in February, I'd post a creative challenge and I'd illustrate the art. And it took so long. It took 2 months of prep. And then every day in February was taken over by it. And by the third year, I mean, and then thousands of people around the world were taking part in it. So that became really popular. But by the third year, it's just like, oh, I can't be bothered. I really can't be bothered. This is too much work. And so the next year I killed it. So it's that type of thing. I guess it's when my fascination in something starts to wane, that's when I start to fall out of love with it. So that's why intentionally designing good endings is really important.
I think this nicely goes on to the next question. I think regards to I think you said earlier on that you don't really navigate the creative industry. You kind of drop in and then drop out, and then you is that intentional? Do you think?
Maybe at some level, I mean, the obvious logical thing is no, it's just circumstances. I've never been part of that industry, but I think that I've never really felt part of anything fully, or felt like that I've fitted into anything fully. I mean, even in the art world, I go to art things. It's like, God, this isn't me. But I think later in life, I've started to embrace that as, oh no, that's okay, mate. That's my sweet spot. That's my niche. That existing on the edges of something. So it probably, I could. The surface answer is no. It's just logistical. I never trained in any of that industry, but probably there is something about that. I think becoming too much part of something, I maybe experience losing some of the freedom, particularly the freedom to do strange stuff or the freedom to fuck up. So, yeah, I've never really been part of it.
I was just thinking of staying on the edges of creativity, and do you think it's creative? Do we think we are we protecting our creativity, or do you think does it do more harm not getting involved in the industry in some way?
Um, you mean for creatives getting involved in the creative industry?
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think the whole thing, it comes back to, is whatever I'm doing, whether that's paid work, unpaid work, is that allowing me to follow my fascination? So I think a creative job, an artist job, is just to be fascinated, genuinely, deeply fascinated in whatever you're fascinated by, and finding ways to do that. And if someone pays you to do that, then brilliant. It's, I mean, the advantage that I have of there's so many industries that I've worked in and showed up and done stuff is because I'm not an expert in them. I bump into all of the unquestioned norms and rules and language, and like I would say, I haven't got a clue what you're talking about. I understand the words, but what do you actually mean by that? And that doesn't always go down well, but quite often it can. And the first talks that I did in creative industry, like for big creative companies or big creative conferences, I'd go there thinking, what the hell are they going to get from me? I'm not even part of this. And consistently, me not being part of it and not, I couldn't create something that I thought they'd like because I don't know them. That was really helpful. And that's where I'm always interested in learning from the outsiders, the people that aren't part of something but are passionate about it. So I think that's the thing, like for creatives, and the creative industry is a wonderful industry to be in if it works for you. There's some really interesting companies and people and projects out there. I think the question would be, am I, is this nurturing and complementing my fascination and my natural, beautiful wonkiness? Or am I having to bend myself out of shape here to fit in? And it both can be okay. If it's, I mean, I've done jobs and full-time jobs in the middle bit of the sandwich where I was bending myself out of shape, but I not always, but I knew I was because I needed to earn some money. I think as long as it's a conscious choice, I think the trap is when maybe being in an industry for 10 years or 15 years, you look back and go, oh, what happened? I left myself behind back there.
Yeah, and I think it's probably a bit refreshing. I know you were saying that, what am I doing here in this room or in this space? And you probably touched on some people's, you know, outer way of thinking, because everyone's thinking of corporate, the project, what we need to do, and you're kind of being very transparent, saying, "But have you thought about this? What am I doing here? What why are you making yourself tied and tongue tied about something that's not important?" You're kind of questioning their inner dialogue, and you're that person that prods them a bit and saying, "Oh, take them out of themselves," kind of situation,
Yeah,
and
no, I
that's
like that.
refreshing.
Yeah, and I think it's just by doing that, and people will do that with me as well, that it directs the attention back inwards. And I've done quite a lot of work in academia and like supervision on masters programs, and particularly in the world of like culture change, particularly in the corporate world of culture change. There's a language that I understand, but people disappear behind. And a lot of what I used to say when I was supervising dissertations about stuff like that is, what do you believe? Like they'd write like, here's what some of the great theorists believe, and here's what the theory says, and this is how the theory can be applied. And I say, what do you believe? And it would stump people. But I think that's the most important thing is, what are my needs? What are the things that are important to me that I'll make a stand for? What do I believe? And am I able to find ways to do that? Because we listen, we can lose ourselves behind the language. And I went straight from school into work, but then I did a master's degree later in life, and I wrote my dissertation about spontaneity. And I wrote it whilst I was in a full-time job in the corporate world, which I just can't imagine that now. It's like, how did I do that? But part of what I did for my research and my dissertation is I recorded myself in meetings and in other situations like performing improv and stuff like that. And then it was about like 8 or 9 years, maybe even 10 years after I did that, the recording came up on shuffle play for some reason when I was listening. And I listened to myself speaking in this meeting and I just thought, I have not got a clue what I am talking about. And that's me. And that it's like, wow, what is this language that I'm using that's impenetrable? At the time, I wasn't thinking that because that's the language. If I had, if that me was talking to me now, I'd say, can you just stop? I don't know what you're talking about. So I think it's just a natural thing, isn't it, of how we create norms and how we create cultures, but realizing they're not real. They're socially constructed.
That reminds me, you've got a mask workshop, people to explore parts of themselves that I've never met before. What does mask reveal about a person, do you think, that they may never seen or discovered before about?
Interest in masks started when, again, when I was doing my dissertation, I trained with a theatre director called Keith Johnson, who's credited as like one of the grandfathers of improvisation. And at one of his workshops, Keith got out this old box of masks and said, "Oh, I think we'll do some masks." And got these freaky looking like half masks out, just the top half of the face. And I just thought, I'm not going to do that. That looks too terrifying. And I did it and I hated it. And it's just, I thought I got it wrong. It didn't make any sense. But I became fascinated by it because the way that Keith worked with masks, he called it trance masks. And he'd use a mirror and the sort of the shock, I guess, of experiencing yourself as different with the mask on to create like this spontaneous state. And so I went back, even though I hated the first experience, I went back and did more and more masks and then soon realized this is, I loved how freaky and weird it is. And it's, I like it when people have been to my mask workshops and people ask them, what's it about? They go, I don't know how to describe it. So I then developed my own techniques that I call Gestalt masks, which is a similar thing inspired by Keith's work, which is you're using a mask that looks nothing like it does on your face when it does when you look at it off your face. And through warming up and getting closer to that spontaneous self-expression, people find themselves just expressing parts of their personality that have been repressed or they didn't know that was there. And then I'm working with them one-to-one and I'm spotting these little things and helping nurture it. And I've seen people that want to be more assertive become more assertive, or people that want to be more still become more still, or people that can't sing like create a voice and things like that. And it just fascinates me like how much of a thin slice of ourselves that we potentially inhabit and express. And masks are a very weird and intense but powerful and brilliant way of doing that. And I've been running workshops for like 12 years now, and I've never had anyone take off a mask and go, oh, I'm so embarrassed. Lots of people have taken off a mask and gone, I've no idea where that came from. And then lots of people have come back to see what else is in there. So it's my favorite workshop to do. And I only do like 3 or 4 a year because they're utterly exhausting because they're so intense and brilliant.
So it's a mixture of like, was it psychology, theatre,
Yeah,
improv? Yeah.
it is. And again, I come at it backwards. It's just, oh, I wonder what would happen if I run a mask workshop, and then making sense of it through a lens of an experience of improv and psychology. But it's one of those things that I like the magic and wonder and mystery of it, and I don't really want to understand much more about it. I'm very careful around boundaries and making sure people know what they're coming to, even though some people have turned up and then at the end said, I thought this was a mask making workshop. It was a bit different to what I thought. Because what I find is I'm asked by a lot of corporates, can you come and do a mask workshop for people on this course? And I always say, probably not. Because it tends to be like, there's different, like this week they're going to do accounting, then they're going to do strategy, and then they're going to do this freaky mask thing, and then they're going to do, I don't know, HR. It's not, I find people ask for stretch and difference and challenge, but don't really want it. And masks do that in a brilliant way. And so, yeah, I love the mystery of it and the magic of it. It's limited to 10 people. I make it as affordable as possible because I don't think this type of work should just be accessible to those that have got the money to do it. And 10 people come along, but there's like 70 people in the workshop, really.
I know that people are discovering themselves while they're putting the mask on, but has there been anything unexpected situations that you didn't expect to find when people were putting their masks on that tickled you or entertained you or horrified you?
Every time, and it's still a challenge for me as well because I'm facilitating and coaching and nurturing this thing that doesn't know what it is, that's discovering itself for the first time. So as a coach and as someone that works one-to-one with people, that's a great workout for me because I'm right on that edge of not knowing what's going on. And what's interesting, we often think of masks as something we hide behind, and that's mainly what masks are written, but these are masks that reveal. And the moments that come to mind was I do a thing at most workshops, which is a mask TED talk. and it's basically someone will walk on stage in a mask, and I will say the name of the talk, which is normally some bizarre talk like "What Squirrels Taught Me About Love" or something like that, and they have 2 seconds to prep, and it's a 2 minute talk, and they will give these beautiful, eloquent, amazing, inspiring, engaging talks without any hesitation, with stage presence. And I've not told them to do that, and every those talks astound me every time. And there's been favorite ones. Someone did a talk that was 10 ways to kill a gerbil. I don't come up with the titles. The group come up with the titles, and we put them in a hat. That was one of the funniest things that I've seen. And it was just this person listing these ways to kill a gerbil. And it's like, this shouldn't really be funny. But there's something about masks and presence that someone could be talking absolute nonsense, but you're captivated by it. I mean, this must be how cult leaders or US presidents work. Like they just captivate, or anyone really, any like, leader, they captivate people that just say more stuff. And then there's been challenging situations where there's been someone who's put on a mask, and sometimes they're wild and wacky, and sometimes they're genuinely feeling fear or scared or anxiety. And I'm not engaging with the person in the mask, I'm engaging with what's there. And often it will be, what do you need? Do you want to sit down? And sometimes I'll just sit in silence with them. And it's really intense. There was once where someone put on the mask and they discover who they are, like, in that moment. And it was around the time when the Calais jungle, the refugee camp, was in the news a lot. I mean, it still exists. It's just not in the news as much, but it was in the news a lot. And so that it tends to be, if there's stuff in the field of our experience, it will happen. And it seemed that this guy was a refugee or an asylum seeker, but he didn't name it. But it sort of become clear that it was something like that. And I sat down with him on the floor and was just listening to him, listening to his experience and empathizing. And then every now and then he'd get really angry with me, like, as like being part of the problem. And it's like, oh, okay. And then there'd be, and it was so intense and so tough. And the audience watching it found it so tough. And afterwards he took off the mask and he'd found it really intense. But that's such an important moment. It's like, oh wow, we've not experienced sitting down with someone that's actually had that experience, but we are, like, it's like the mask's generating an intense empathy and compassion. And so moments like that always stick with me. The funny ones, the intense ones, the ones where I'm thinking, I don't know what to do here.
Yeah, it feels like almost like therapy for them, but intense for you probably.
Yeah.
Do you feel like, I don't know how to deal with this? Am I trained to cope with something as serious as this? But
No, I mean, I'm very confident with boundaries in the mask workshop, and I've done lots of therapeutic training, and I know I'm very clear on the boundary between therapeutic and therapy. But that doesn't mean that it could tip into that. And I'm clear with people coming like beforehand. It's like, this is fun and intense and playful, and it can get you in touch with stuff. So if you know you have unresolved trauma or something like that, maybe speak to me beforehand. But quite often, I'm never thinking I don't know what to do with this, or I'm not qualified for it. I'm often thinking I'm not sure what to do. And I, I'm really influenced and trained a lot in Gestalt psychology. And really in those moments, I'll just say to the mask, it's like, oh, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do now. How's that for you? It's sort of, I think there's a lot of time creating a safe enough space, and I think the group size contributes to that as well. And people have time, and we have space to process. Like, if we've done something that's been really intense, we can take breaks and things like that. That's not to say it could, it could never like get to an edge for someone or for me. But I always say to people that go when you want, leave when you want, participate as much or as little as you want. If you get to the end of the day and you've not even put on a mask, brilliant. That's fine. You're still participating. And only once someone got to the first break and said, this isn't for me, and left. And it's like, great. I sort of like to engage with participants as adults. So I can take care of you as much as you can take care of yourself. I'm not in your brain. I'm not your therapist. So if stuff's feeling too much, then take responsibility for that and step away.
It sounds like a good experience all around anyway, with regards to wearing a mask, and it's, yeah, it sounds like a great session that you're having, and I hope you keep on doing it. Sounds really good.
But yeah, there's 2 or 3 a year that I do, and they're always uniquely different.
So studio drawer is that physical drawer that's in your desk, the messy part of your life that nobody wants to see or you don't want anyone to know about. So I'm going to ask a few questions about you as a creative.
I like that.
It's a bit light-hearted. So someone's just opened your studio drawer. What's the most unexpected item we're going to find inside?
Picture. I'm not in my studio now, but I can picture the drawer. I think there are those interdental toothpick things.
Got a
Which,
floss?
yeah, I mean, I've never used them in the studio. I don't know why they're there, but they're in the drawer right next to. I've got 2 desks in the studio. They're in there. I don't know. There's probably some other stuff in there like that. Oh, there's an old CBD oil that's gone off.
So it's time for a clear out.
Yeah, yeah. I think, but stuff like that. I think the bit it's not in a drawer, but there's some really old paintings that I don't like, and it's like I don't want people to rifle through them because I don't like them. I only want them to see the stuff that I like. So I'd be more embarrassed by those and feel the need to explain those.
What is your favourite way to break out of a creative rut?
I think, and it doesn't feel good at the time, but I think you have to absolutely love the creative rut. Love it so much. It's like really embrace it, and it's like, okay, creative rut. I'm not going to try and get out of it. I'm just going to study it and be curious about it. And there's the Buddhist philosophy, which is the obstacle is the path, and it's the idea of move towards the thing you're trying to get away from. And absolutely, it's not like, oh, I'm in a creative rut. Wonderful. I'm enjoying it. It's painful and it's horrible, and it can lead into a spiral of other stuff. I speak about it on an episode of the podcast, I think. I was in that rut once, and this is a tiny example. When I'm in that rut, it's like time, my relationship with time changes. It becomes time drags, and I'm trying to find things to do, and it's just horrible. And I get bored quite easily. And I was sitting in my studio, and time was dragging. I wasn't feeling great, and I was utterly bored. And it's like, what? I don't know what to do. And I thought, well, what would happen if I loved my boredom so much? I loved it so much that I couldn't help but paint it. And so I ended up just improvising a painting that ended up with a painting of this big blue cat, ominous blue cat with a massive
I know the
words on
one,
it
yeah.
saying, I am very bored. And then before I realized it, it's like, oh, 2 hours have gone. I'm not bored anymore. By moving towards that boredom, I've done that. And then that went on, that's become a best-selling t-shirt since then. So I think that thing of, okay, I'm in a rut. The rut is as important as everything else. I don't like it. I don't want to be here. But the more I try to get out of it, for me, the harder it becomes. It's like, I need to move with it. I need to do Tai Chi with the rut rather than boxing.
Wonderful. Another question for you in Studio Drawer. What's the most hilarious wrong assumption someone's made about what you do?
All right. I mean, there's the one I've already mentioned where people come to the mask workshop thinking it's like an arts and craft mask making workshop. I really don't know. That's a really interesting question, because one of the things I struggle with most is a fear of being misunderstood. I don't know if it's a hilarious assumption, but I remember like people thinking that I'm really aloof or above them or something like that. And it's part of my wiring that I'm probably just like panicking in the moment, trying to work out how to interact with someone. So I think that maybe thinking like that's how I am. I think a lot of people will have an assumption around success as an artist, which is purely based on the numbers of followers and stuff like that. But that doesn't make any difference. People say, well, how do you make consistent money as an artist? It's like, why are you asking me? I have no idea.
What is the most ridiculous thing in your studio or workspace, and why is it there?
I think everything, the entire spaces. I mean, I've got a 6'3" mannequin with a massive head, like mask that I made that stands in the corner of the studio, that's holding a cowboy hat that I wore, wearing a cowboy hat that I wore for an exhibition, and a guitar that I painted, and has these gloves on its hands, and that's just in the corner of the studio because I didn't have anywhere to keep it and wanted to get rid of it. But it's a striking thing, and people walk past and look in the window of my studio, and it's the first thing they see. And it takes up so much room, but I love it being there. He's called Len. I love Len being there. And Len actually was a mask that I made to help me experiment with movement and dancing. It's like, why do I feel less comfortable? And I'm tall and long, and so I've always been very conscious of how much space I take up. And I thought, Len was a character that I used to draw. I thought, Len doesn't care. Len will just move in whatever way he wants, however ridiculous it is. So I made the massive mask of Len, and then did some videos of Len dancing. And then Len went to a festival and led a dance class in a tent. I was doing this crazy dancing. And it's like, I couldn't do that, but Len could. So Len had some important memories for me.
Cool. That's the last question of Studio Draw.
I like that.
Yeah. Just remembered. Tell me about your crow friend.
You might see the jackdaws eating their lunch there. But another crow friend, when I moved here, I ended up here by accident in southwest London, but I'm quite close to the Thames. And before I had my studio, I used to spend quite a bit of time just sitting by the Thames painting and walking up and down there a lot. And I walk there every day now to my studio in Kingston. And I've always been interested in creatures. I find creatures much more easy to interact with than humans. And there's just these two crows that were there, and they'd be there all the time. And they seemed maybe slightly interested in me. So I'd stop and I'd sit down and throw them some monkey nuts, because like shelled nuts are prized in the corvid world. And then one of them, there's a pair, I think they're a breeding pair, kept coming closer and closer. And then eventually, it became an obsession. I'd go and see them every day. I put out my hand, and then she came and took a monkey nut from my hand. And then eventually now, when I walk past the river, she's either waiting for me or I call her. I just go, and she comes swooping down, jumps on my lap, and eats monkey nuts out of my hand. And it's lovely because corvids have got a brilliant memory for people. That's why you should never be mean to a crow, because it will then pursue you for the rest of your life. And they teach the next generation as well. They pass on those things. So yeah, that's my crow friend, and she's inspired a number of paintings and bits of artwork. And it's just something so magical and, I don't know, wonderful about that. I will never have any projections with the crow. Like, if she's not there, I won't be thinking, what have I done to offend her? Did I say something bad? Or like when she sits on my lap, it's not that she loves me. It's we have a symbiotic relationship in which I provide her food. And I've known her for 2 years now, and I love that. I'll walk along and see her. And I'm not allowed to have pets in my flat. So, and she's not a pet, but she's my friend. And then I have the jackdaws and crows that come to the window every day, and there's a little wagtail that comes to the window. I call them the windowsill gang. But you can find those little environments in lots of places. Even in a concrete environment, there'll be a crow or something there.
Wonderful. Steve, thank you for sharing your story with me. If anyone wants to reach out to you and support you in your business, how would they do that?
This is the bit I'm always rubbish at. There is on Instagram or on all social media, I'm Steve Zor, which is Steve XOH. You can find me on there. And if you want to see my work and stuff or get in touch, you can send me a message there. And website, which is canscorpionsmoke.com. all one word. So can scorpions smoke? There's only one, or you can just type that into Google. It doesn't go. I'm normally the number one hit, and then you get stuff about smoking scorpions to get high and things like that. And the podcast is called Creative Adventures, an accidental podcast. So any of those are ways of getting in contact.
Thank you, Steve.
No, thank you so much for having me. It's one of those moments where time has just flown by.